Hi, everyone, and welcome to the recording of our panel conversation named Special Delivery, a discussion about mail art. My name is Josephine Lundahl, and I'm the curator and exhibitions coordinator here at Creativity Explored in San Francisco. Thank you all so much for watching. This panel correlates with our current exhibition, the Mail Art Club, which is on view in our gallery on 16th Street in the Mission. We have also made this beautiful exhibition catalog, which is available for purchase alongside with this postcard set. You can buy it in our gallery or online. And I am so thrilled today to have all of these panelists with me. We have our co-curators, Michael Napper and Cheryl Ward, and they are alongside with JD, who is an artist here at CE and who's been very active in the mail art class led by Michael, which also led to this exhibition. We are also so pleased to have Jennie and Charles joining us, who are both active members of the San Francisco Correspondence Co-Op. And now I'm going to stop sharing. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Doing well.
Good. We're happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Okay. So I'm so thrilled to have this whole panel here together, especially because everyone has a different background, expertise, and experience related to mail art, both as a movement, but also as an art form. And I'm so excited to be hearing a little bit from all of you here today. And Jennie, I would love to start with you. Could you share a little bit with us how your mail art practice led to the formation of the San Francisco Correspondence Co-op back in 2011, and a little bit about what it is and how the co-op has evolved since the start?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you for the question. Yeah. Okay. So the San Francisco Correspondence Co-op is a group that I founded in 2011. We've been around for over 10 years now. And that really sprang from my long involvement in the mail art community here in San Francisco. I've been doing mail art since about 1996. And, you know, I started as kind of a little kid. I would always send letters home and I collected stamps and, you know, had a lot of pen pals and that kind of thing. So I've always really, really loved making and sending mail to people. But, you know, I got involved in the scene here through creating a zine, just a zine about mail art. And that really kind of drew a lot of people to me. And I was able to kind of dive in really quickly in the 90s and start corresponding with a lot of people. In 2009, I co-authored a book called Good Mail Day. And so a lot of people came to mail art through that book as well. And in 2009, once that book kind of set sail and, you know, people were, you know, sending me mail because of that book, I thought, you know, it would be really great to have a club where people could get together here in the Bay Area in real life and meet each other, perhaps, you know, make that connection and start corresponding with each other in that way. And so our first meetings were very small. We met at the Mechanics Institute Library. We would meet at different places around town, the Women's Building in the Mission, sometimes a cafe. We started as about a group of 15 or 20 people. And then slowly over time, you know, just more people started hearing about us and wanting to get involved and that sort of thing. And so today we're a group of about, I would say like 40 members strong. And, you know, one of the ways that we grew was definitely by taking things online during the pandemic. So for a long time, our meetings for the last 2.5 years, they were via Zoom, and we gained new members, both, you know, within the state, but also across the country in that way. So that was exciting for our group, for sure. So that's how the Correspondence Co-op started. That's kind of the genesis of it. So, and what I will say is that the way that we run and keep things kind of fresh and moving forward is every year we have a new person or group of people who kind of run the meetings and keep things moving forward. And so last year, Charles was part of that group of three. Charles, Patty Wren, and Sarah Wildfang ran the group last year. So.
That's great. Well, Charles, this is a perfect way for me to ask you then, how did you get involved or how did you hear about the co-op in the first place?
It was through a friend, Andrea Grimes, who she had been working in the special collections of the library. And I used to work for the city and government television, and I would go down the hall and hang out with her many years ago when they were in the old main library. And she was kind of like just a support for me. And so she got to know me over the years, and she would mention, once the co-op started, she mentioned it to me, and I don't know why, I kept planning on coming, and it took a few years till I finally, I think it was 2018, maybe late 2018. I wish I had come earlier, because it was definitely something that it was just finding people that you have a lot in common with. And it's just been a very potent kind of circle of friends. And I feel like it's very diverse. And I feel like it's really opened my eyes. I've always felt like I was an artist. I have just an undergraduate degree from San Francisco State in media arts. And I'm really interested in kind of community building and the ways that different types of artists from different backgrounds relate to each other. I think it's kind of fascinating to see how, unfortunately, a lot of the time the world is sort of set up in a way where people end up in kind of separate alcoves, and they don't necessarily think that they have as much in common as they really do. So something like mail art, I think, is a great sort of equalizer, because it's something that everybody can share, and it's a very low key and really fun, exciting, and it basically introduces you to a lot of different techniques that you might not necessarily have thought you might be interested in. So that was sort of my introduction, and it's just been a very like psychologically supportive group.
Yeah.
Like, it's really helped me get through COVID. Is having people that we're all kind of going through the same thing and
Totally.
sharing some of the same struggles.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think that definitely resonates with the conversations I've had with Michael Napper and Cheryl too, and just how, well, Michael, how you started this class here at CE with mail art right in the beginning of the pandemic, and then how that kind of now became this wonderful exhibition. And I guess for both Michael and Cheryl, it sounds like the co-op has kind of responded the same way as you did in the beginning, like kind of trying to find a way to fill this need of connection when we have to be separated. And I know that things are changing slightly or a little bit, but what are your thoughts around that? And how do you feel that the mail art class has kind of been able to fill that void?
Well, let me see. I've always loved mail for a long time, and I was living in Santa Barbara. A friend of mine moved to San Francisco. This is 1978, and San Francisco at that time was really flourishing with a new punk scene. Artists were doing a lot of do-it-yourself stuff. Clubs were opening up out of little machine shops and stuff like that. And so he would send me flyers. But sometimes he would take the flyer and make a postcard out of it, or an envelope out of a flyer. And then we started corresponding back and forth. And over the years, I really did that with a lot of different friends all over the United States and some in Europe. And then email came along and kind of killed it, really. For a lot of people, because it was just much more efficient and quick and easy. And so everybody kind of kept up that way. But there was a kind of a core group of us that really missed that hands-on thing. And I think that is the key to mail art, is that when I receive something from one of the artists in the group, I know that they've touched it. That has a human touch that, maybe some people wouldn't value as much, but I do. And I think that particularly during the pandemic, when at the very beginning we were scrambling here at Creativity Explorer to try to figure out how are we going to stay in touch with the artists during this time. We had no idea. When we first closed down, I thought, okay, it's going to be 2 weeks, and then we're going to be back. But as time went on, I'm continually impressed with Creativity Explorer's innovation and really fast response to this. But we all realized, well, a lot of artists don't have computers. They wouldn't be able to use a computer even if they had one. Many of the artists are nonverbal. And so I started sending out packages to them with self-addressed stamped envelopes. I made little booklets. I kind of tried to create this little phenomena that they would respond to, and they did. And then soon, many of them got up to speed with the Zoom classes. We started meeting weekly, a core group of us. And a lot of people, a lot of the artists were of a generation that never really had to deal with mail. They had to email. And so this was a new thing to them. And I wondered, well, are they going to respond to this? And many have, because every day, you don't know, am I going to get something in the mail today? You go down, you check the mailbox, And I think that there is a certain type of person who really appreciates that. And some people don't, I know people who are very creative, very smart people that just, that's not in their gene, But I kind of feel like the group that we have, it's in that DNA that we really appreciate the handmade, that. So
Totally.
I don't know if that answers the question, but
No, it does. No, I think it does. I think just specifically because I know that the co-op has existed for so long, like way before the pandemic, but I feel like there's always there, at least to your point too, Michael, there is always a group of people who crave that handmade part. And since all of us work in art somehow, it's interesting. But again, with mail, I think Cheryl, you and I have talked about that too. Like we have younger artists here at CEU who never really, I guess, received mail or created mail or written a letter, handwritten letter to someone. You jumped into this class and you're on our board. And I know, have you created any type of mail art before, or was this like kind of your introduction? And have you been able to see like an overlap age-wise in this group, or is it, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about.
Well, for starters, I think I have the gene, certainly, and I found my community. And I've always been a letter writer. I love ephemera, I love stamps, I love paper, I love any kind of design, and I'm a maker. So this has given me an opportunity to really have to make work. It's not a chore any longer. At some point, you think, oh my goodness, I have to make more cards. Now I want to go home and make cards. So it's really exciting. And when I first heard about it through Michael, I just asked if I could sit in, and I think I've told the story a lot of times, but I asked if I could sit in, and I just said, I'll never leave. But I love the relationships between, the artist, between the teachers. There's some really talented and dedicated people doing the work. And I just, I think going to the mailbox and finding something that's made and sent to you by an artist who actually, when I first started, I hadn't met any of the artists. I sort of knew them a little bit from the studio, but over the last year and a half, I've gotten to really know folks personally, some of their families, and it's really been an inspiration, and the kind of work that the board does supports this. The organization supports this, and the outpouring of love and support has just been amazing. And I hope that it just goes forever. I'm really, really happy to be here and to connect with Jennie and Charles and other folks in the community who are doing the work. And it's not new, it's fairly new to us, but people have been doing this for many, many years. And now you sort of go back and you start to think about, oh my God, this has been around forever. So it's really to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'm jealous you've been with the class since the beginning. And speaking of to JD, I know that you've been extremely prolific in this class. I know that you're prolific in a lot of the other classes too, but I would love to hear from you. Like, had you ever worked anything with like mail related art before, or was this the first time?
It was the first time since the pandemic started.
Right.
Like before we had the class, Michael used to send me stuff and then
Yeah.
start drawing and send it back to him. And I kind of got used to it. I kind of just like it. Like for me, I'm an introvert, so I just always at home. So I just keep to myself. But I like to do art all the time.
Yeah.
And the mail is so different because I can see stuff at home that I don't usually mail, like cardboard or just anything. I just save that and I'm just draw on it. Just draw on everything like books or just even construction paper or newspaper. That's what I like about the mail. You just find different straps and pretty much like junk or be like, oh, I'm gonna just keep this. Or like, oh, I found this cool cardboard, this string atom, and then I'm gonna just use it and then just draw on it. That's what I like. And then for the connection part, it's cool too. Like Michelle says, like some of the artists that I don't know from the other studio have the connection from season 1 and 2, and then we send art from there, and then it's kind of cool and fun.
Yeah, I totally hear you too. I think it's so interesting with what this art form allows you to use as materials, right? Like nothing, like don't throw away anything ever. Like you can literally use anything. And that's what's so cool about all kinds of things. It's so wonderful and it's so democratic in that way as an art form. Yeah, thank you, JD. Your pieces are really, really amazing. I enjoy them every time I go through the gallery. And speaking of materials too, Charles, I was curious, I know that you're an interdisciplinary artist and
whatever that means.
Yeah, whatever that means. But
all artists are interdisciplinary.
I guess so. But I think how has the mail art community affected your other art making? You know what I mean? Like, I guess of course you bring in something to mail art, but have you noticed that has kind of affected your other practice in some way?
In some ways it's kind of, I mean, partly because of just the insular quality of COVID. I largely what I've been doing the last few years is kind of music performance type things that have involved kind of theatrical elements and just kind of very noisy stuff, a little bit punk rock, but the kind of thing that's really sort of typically in a public environment and just I don't think necessarily the process for me, I basically things just kind of ramped down with live performance just kind of ceased to happen, I think, for a lot of performing arts people. I was already pretty active doing mail art stuff, nowhere near as prolific as a lot of people, but it's something that I right away felt like I could kind of patch into, and it allowed me to kind of have the same satisfaction that I was getting in different ways. But I can't really say necessarily how it's changed my other ways, because I think I've actually pretty much only been doing mail art really the last 2 years. I've been experimenting a little bit with some audio projects, and I've been trying to find ways of kind of combining different aspects. I mean, I do like to send music to people through the mail, so I often make mixes and things, and sometimes music related memorabilia. I like to share old magazines and things with friends, but it's kind of odd. I mean, I'm looking forward to, I feel like we're in such a transitionary period right now. I think a lot of people are really reevaluating how they're relating to kind of a creative community outside of their habits. But I think it's something that it kind of allows you to just percolate ideas that you can use in other art forms. I've just continued to be inspired and find ideas that I feel like are going to translate into other things that I do eventually. But I've just been happy focusing on kind of cottage industry for the moment, just sending things to people in the mail. That's really like helped me survive.
Yeah, Jennie, have you noticed a big difference? I mean, I know there's difference everywhere, but has it been a very specific shift within the co-op from the beginning of the pandemic? Not just, I know that you were already sending mail back and forth, and you probably met up more in person, but is there anything else, like maybe even what the art looks like that you've been able to notice?
That's a good question. I think like Michael alluded to earlier, when the pandemic started, we really all thought this was going to be over in a month, right? And so I feel like when I think back about a lot of the things that I've been receiving over the last 2.5 years, in the really early days, and tell me if you think this is true too, like in the early sort of like March, April, May zone of 2020, a lot of the mail was like, okay, well, I'll see you at next month's meeting in person, and then it, we all kind of realized, oh, that's not going to happen. But maybe by the end of summer, and people's mail really reflected that, the things that they were making and sending. And then, kind of as things started dragging on longer and longer, I feel like the mail that I was receiving at my PO box, people were being a lot more candid. They were sharing a lot of what they were going through, whether that meant long letters or, writing postcards that were short but really intense. And people were just, working to kind of like process what they were experiencing and going through, and kind of mourning this sense of loss. So when I think back about the mail that I have received over the past 2 years, there is a lot of that. There's a lot of processing. There's a lot of information that people are still working through, I think, so I don't know. Do you?
I feel like there have been so many things that people have sent me that just are little kind of aphorisms that I've actually just felt so thankful for, that I have, like everybody does this, I'm sure, where you just have some shelves in your house where you kind of rotate little things that you want to think about. And I've just, some things that I've received from people over the last couple of years, it's just, I'm very thankful. And they just allow me to kind of remind myself, of like trying to create, balance and create a sense of sustainability somehow. I think it's very disorienting. I think even before this pandemic, I've often felt like people in our kind of modern era don't realize how overwhelmed we are so much of the time. We're kind of constantly still digesting things that have happened, weeks, months ago, and we never really have the time to kind of sit still and start to really think about, what all this means. And I think in some ways, it's tragic, but this time period has allowed us to really reevaluate and kind of think about our relationships with each other in different ways, and appreciate the connections that we have, and really understand how important connections are with people in our lives that we don't always really respond to. I think that's a really valuable insight that I think we're being given.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would also say that that's one of the things that with the co-op and co-op members, they have been so vocal with sharing that amongst other members. Someone mentioned a little bit earlier about how it almost feels like when you fall into the mail art community and you start exchanging with people, it's almost like you've found your tribe. And I can't even tell you how many times I've heard that from people. Like people will tell us these stories. I would, for example, I've always decorated envelopes, or I've always sent out fun postcards, or I've always written letters, but I would send to my family or my neighbors, and then I would never receive anything back. But I met you guys, and suddenly this thing really blossomed, and there is this incredible sense of connection that that, not only through the pandemic, I think has really strengthened for both of our groups, but it's something that the mail art community has always had and has always thrived on. So,
Yeah, I can't think of, as an art historian too, I can't think of any other art movements or art form that connects people this way, right? That's kind of, because it's so much about sharing. And to your point, you're sending something out and you're always receiving something back.
yeah.
That's not, I can't think of anything else.
Yeah, it's very much a gift economy. The eternal network. There's a reason why they call it that. Or mail artists call it that. But yeah, it really is based on sending and receiving, like giving and sharing. So
I was thinking about that driving over.
Yeah.
When I travel, I send, and my husband gets at least 25 postcards to, when I've never gotten one back. But I can send one card to one of my mail art pals and get 5 back. Like, great rewards, great rewards. And I hadn't really even thought about it, but it's so true that you really get, you have an instant, gratification, satisfaction of knowing that something's going to come back to you, and maybe not who you sent it to, but to someone else, and that's fine too. Yeah, doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's an incredible way to build community, really. And also it doesn't have to cost much either. And that's what's so interesting too with the material. To JD's point too, you can just find something, save it, and turn it into art. And speaking of, I'm curious, how much mail art do you guys all have at home? Yeah, look at those faces. I love that.
Jennie, she probably has a house full, right?
Yeah, I'm curious, all of you. Do you know, kind of?
I probably have now maybe 200, I'd say 200.
I feel the same, 200.
Yeah, about that.
I mean, I counted in this whole show here, what was it, 300 pieces just in this gallery. And then the window is just a whole other thing. And then I think we all each have the equivalent of a banker's box at home of work that we've gotten since putting up the show, or what didn't go in the show.
Right.
Yeah, it's just, and it keeps going. We're still sending work out, and
archiving is a problem, and it's something that we talk about often. I mean, I come from, my parents are both sort of academic science type people, and my mother's library science historian, and I've struggled for a long time trying to just stay on top of my own materials, let alone stuff that's kind of coming in. And I'm really discouraged sometimes that I don't have a better system, but I'm excited because I feel like, even though I think everybody has their own system, whether it really completely works or not, but I'm constantly like discovering things that I think I wouldn't necessarily discover if I had everything like, alphabetized or chronologically organized. I come across things that, I just was sharing a postcard that was a subscription to popular mechanics that one of my childhood friends sent me, a postcard in junior high. And I just shared that with him via text the other day. And it's really a hilarious postcard, and it just captures the moment. And it's completely hilarious too, because it was supposedly a Christmas gift of a subscription, and then he never even actually never sent the check in for the subscription. So I never got the magazine, but the postcard was just like a Rube Goldberg kind of series of 5,000 things that are triggering other things. But anyway, I just sometimes I find things and I'm just excited, like, my God, like, even though my system doesn't really work, and I have a project that I refer to as failed filing system, because it's just kind of I have to make some kind of sense of humor out of it, because it's sort of, also sort of trying a lot of the time. But I think, we're all kind of in the process of trying to make sense of the things that we collect and save. And I'm really trying to encourage people in our group to really, and I think a lot of people feel similarly, that it's okay to recycle stuff. Like, sometimes you get things from people, and I'd much rather have somebody use part of what I sent them to send someone else than just like put it in a box somewhere. I mean, I think it's great to have, things to bring back memories and go back through those things. And there's plenty of things that I've saved that I would never want to necessarily part with. But I think it's really important to kind of like keep things flowing, keep stuff moving so that it's not all just, mountains of stuff.
Building up like archaeological layers.
It is like, I was just telling Jennie earlier, I wanted to be a paleontologist as a kid. And sometimes when I'm digging through my papers, I feel like this is just the same thing. I'm like digging for some little, bird bone in this box. You'll never know if you find it.
Big M. I need a big black.
That's true.
That's what's so cool too, when we were looking through. So what Cheryl and Michael, you were both bringing in hundreds and hundreds of pieces that you have all collected during the pandemic or since the pandemic. And again, to your point, like we're only even showing a handful of them. But what I love about looking at it too is it kind of it reminds me of things that happened during the pandemic, because part of it feels like it was just the time was standing still. But I think even a piece behind you, Cheryl, it's like new precedent. And I'm like, oh yeah, that happened, and it's just so interesting. And again, when you can look at the dates that everything was sent and everything, it's super interesting. And it definitely takes you down like a whole time capsule in a way.
Yeah.
Right. Did you feel that way, Michael, too, when you were looking through?
Yeah. And, it's funny. Some artists in the group addressed contemporary issues more than others.
Mm-hmm.
But after a while, everybody really started showing their distinct style,
Yeah.
So, if I went to the mailbox and I got 7 pieces, I'd know right away, this is JD, or this is Joseph Omoleole's, or this is Ada Chow's. This goes to something that I thought about quite a bit during this time, is that as an artist and as a teacher, I work in the studio. Pre-pandemic, I would provide an 18 by 24 piece of paper to one of the artists, and they would work on it over a series of, days, maybe sometimes weeks. And that would be good. But with mail art, it's such a small format. You can kind of go through a lot of different styles, a lot of different pieces. And for me, as a painter, when I stretch up a canvas and it's 18 by 24 or 24 by 30, there's a sense of like, all right, don't screw it up. This took some work. I have 10 layers of gesso on there and I stretch it myself. But with a postcard, okay, I screwed it up. It's not that great. Just throw it away, So I think people were able to find a voice, a vision through this smaller format. And also just when you're making something for somebody else, you have them in mind and you're not in your head as much. I don't know. There's a lot of aspects to.
Oh, that's a great point.
That's different than actual. I'm going to do a series of paintings.
Yeah.
I think like when you were saying like when you just send like the small, I kind of like that. Sometimes you get destroyed or something because it's like we care about it, but it's like still like the art, because like if I did like on a drawing or something and then like do the mail. Say like I sent to Cheryl, and then it's like, oh, the drawing got this way, but then become like the art or even the stamp, and be like, oh, it's still you, even though it just got this way, or like even the corners, or if I use like a cardboard, and then like half of it is just like coming off, but it's still like it still look nice because it's the art, and then just think about the shape of it too. It's kind of cool that I like about that.
And one of the challenges is what will it go through the mail?
Yeah.
Will they take it? So we have some really interesting things arriving on our doorstep, and you wonder, are you kidding me? And I also wonder how many things have been sent that never arrived.
That didn't make
it. So too. So.
That's a good point. Well, we're very appreciative of our also our local postman, who's been really excited about delivering some of this mail to us too. And he's just been coming in, he's like, what is this? Yeah, and he gave us a hat, which is so great. But JD, I love what you were just talking about there too, like specifically about the sizes, because I know that you paint you work on large scale too, and the freedom that the smaller scale kind of gives you. And I was thinking about it now when you said, how it goes through the mail. And I think that we touched a little bit on it, like, is this the type of art that you sell? Do you collect this type of art? And again, how that kind of goes against, this capitalistic way of the art market, for example. And I was wondering if anyone has any thoughts about that in general, how this art movement, did it always start that way? Like, did it start from kind of an anarchistic sense of like, we want to be an art movement, but not part of this? Do you know, Jennie, to that, or Michael, or?
I mean, JD, do you want to?
You would probably be able to address that more. I think better than me. Certainly, Charles or Jennie.
I mean, what I'll say about that is that there is a history of male artists wanting to circumvent the traditional gallery system. And this was a way, by kind of taking the processes into their own hands of making and sending, creating and sharing with each other, as opposed to established systems. And also removing the monetary aspect out of it, taking that away from gallery systems. That for a long time was always a really big part of mail art. Again, it goes back to the sharing and the gift kind of economy nature. It's maybe not the best term to use, but these days I think that's changing. I think I can't remember if I was talking to Charles about it or maybe our group, but it's a really different art world. It's a very different mail art world than it was when, this whole thing took off in the late 60s, early 70s. So I think personal philosophies are different now around it, but I feel like primarily a lot of the reason why people make and send is to share their creative style, their way of working, their thoughts, their feelings, what they do. And it's really, like we were talking about, the small size makes it a little less precious somehow, a little more easy to share. You don't hold it as tight. And so it makes it a lot easier to kind of like throw those seeds out into the world and just see what happens. So yeah, mail art did initially start as a way of, kind of wresting power away from, sort of dictatorial gallery system. So.
And sorry, back to you, JD, to answer that question, which is great to hear that from you, Jennie. Is that kind of how you feel too, JD, with like the relationship that you feel towards the small size, small scale?
A lot, so I feel like just the experiment part, like Jennie was saying, that it's just about the size, that it doesn't really matter because it's just the connection with other people, and then you can just throw something on it and whatever happens. So that's why I just feel like it's more like you have less chance to experiment than doing something real big and what about the quality, like, oh, this is good paper or whatever. But for this mail art, it's something that not even good paper, that's just like part of the art, because I just feel like I'm gonna just send it out and then see if the mail, pass it and come through.
Yeah.
So that's why I feel it's just like a lot of people just experiment and see if it's gonna come through the mail. Because I remember I seen Michael, I think I found like it was like a corner of a wall.
Right.
You remember that? It was like a painting, just like a white wall. It was just a corner of it.
Plaster.
Yeah, it was like plaster or something.
Plaster.
And I just did a drawing on it. I found out like, okay, see, it's going in the mail, and I seen it and went to the mail. So I think for pretty much everyone is just more having an experiment of see what's coming in the mail and just sharing your thoughts and not really worry about messing up, because the mess up part, I think, is the best part of it because it's part of the art.
And then, before we started this today, JD and I were looking around the show, and we were looking at this piece that JD had sent me where I remember getting it that day. He just took a piece of regular junk mail that he'd received. He didn't even open it, but he just wrote, "I hate junk mail." And we were laughing because he never even opened it.
Yeah.
Who knows what's in there? Maybe it's a free gift certificate.
That's an important point too, because I think reconsidering like what junk mail is, like junk mail sort of takes on a whole new value when you start thinking, because I've recycled so many things, aspects of junk mail, that I'm actually, it doesn't bum me out as much getting certain things in the mail. My wife always complains that, like I'm getting way more interesting mail than she does, but then there'll be junk mail that she'll get and I'll just be coveting the envelope. I want to use that.
Yeah.
Oh, how much have I taken out of the trash that my husband's thrown?
That's how I feel
and
too.
I'm just thinking about this, Charles, because I have a True West magazine at home, and I just flipped through it. I came from work, and of course, there's some great images, and the subscription card fell out, and I thought, but I am going home, straight home, and I'm going to see a True West subscription.
Please do.
I want to use everything. There's nothing that goes through my house that doesn't have some thought about how I can use it too. And of course, it's overflowing. But
I came across some junk mail from 1966 recently that I repackaged and sent to a friend, and it was kind of exciting because we were both born in that year, and it was just it was it was like a publisher's clearinghouse or some kind of weird thing that had like an actual like paper record inside. It was like they were trying to get you to subscribe, and you would get a bunch of free swing band music LPs if you subscribed to some magazines. And so this record was still inside there, and it was like, oh my God, like this was just incredible. I was like so thrilled. And just the fact that it was just junk mail, but somehow I think my friend Christian Bruno, who sort of helped introduce us to you guys, was the one who left that with me. And it was like, it's like junk mail. If it sits around long enough, it becomes like really precious.
That is really cool. I love just the idea too, that how art can just turn anything into something more precious. It's really, really special. We have actually collected a few questions from people on our Instagram who wanted to ask this group a few questions regarding mail art. So this is open for anyone who wants to answer. But someone asked, how do you start a group and how many people can be in a group? And I guess I know that the C group is about 10 people maybe, and the co-op sounds like you're 40. But thoughts on that? Should it be a limit or?
Well, I'll just say that when the group started, it was about 10 or 11, 12. And a couple of people dropped out. It wasn't for them. They didn't have that male gene, So we've had a core group of, I think it's about 7 or 8 artists. And then Cheryl, another board member, has come on recently. We have a teacher who used to teach at Creativity Explored. She's back in Michigan, but she stayed in touch and she loves it. It's a way for her to stay in touch. I don't know. I mean, at a certain point, I think, and recently we have Charles and
you're
Jennie.
Always welcome.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think the only thing is you don't want it to get too big because you want to continue to send art out to people, and after a while, if you've got 60 or 70 people, somebody gets forgotten or.
Yeah, when you said 40, that was surprised. How do you manage that?
Yeah.
Well, there's a long list of people who are kind of part of the community, and there's like as we've had the meeting, there are quite a few people who just never really wanted to do the Zoom meetings, so they've been just kind of doing their thing. Mm-hmm. We're just starting recently, going to have our first in-person meeting this next month. But I think it can be a rotation. I think at some point organically, when groups get larger, there's always going to be a core group that's going to be central to what, and other people can kind of come in and out as they please. But I think it is a good idea to not get too carried away, but I think you could have something really fulfilling in a really small group. You know,
Yeah.
5 to 10 people would be keep you busy for all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's also important to consider just how much time one has and how much kind of bandwidth one has, because there's no way that like one person could manage the group that we have. I mean, 40 people is a lot, and we do a lot of work. We have demos every month. We send out a physical mailing list. We, arrange for the space and the place, and, sometimes the Zoom meeting, like there's a lot of moving parts. But I would say that if really you got 5 friends and it's like, y'all want to send to each other, just do it. Like, that's a group. Give yourself a name. You got it. I don't think there are any hard and fast rules here. Like, there's really not.
That's actually the other question. And I feel like we've touched on that a little bit, but there was someone asking, are there rules what you can send? And it sounds like it's more up to like the mail, like, will it go through, right?
What you can get away with.
Yeah.
I'm with Michael on this. Well, okay. So what I will say, this is always my disclaimer. You have to use real postage somewhere.
No, you don't.
Yeah, you do. You should. Yes, Charles.
You should, but you don't.
Charles.
I mean,
for the sake,
at least, we don't want to go into details here,
for
but
the sake of this recording,
Okay.
you should always put a postage stamp on there somewhere.
somewhere.
And then, there's a reason why they ask you those questions about liquid, perishable, fragile, hazardous. Like, you can't really, they need to know if you're sending that kind of stuff through the mail. So, I mean, there are some rules just for safety, but as far as, taking, like this flower pot and putting a label on it and then all of your postage like all around the rim and then just handing it over to someone at the postal counter. Yeah, sure. Try it. Get ready to have a conversation with the person on the other side of the counter. But yeah.
There's coconuts sent through the mail.
Yeah. There's a great essay online that I'm not going to remember the name of right now, but I believe it's written by someone named, I believe the author's name is Michael Ferranto. And he talks about over a year, like all the things that he sent through the mail, including the coconut that Cheryl just mentioned, but cans of soup, a hockey stick, like all of these hilarious things. And he records his interactions with the postal people, and then also, details. Did it arrive? Did it arrive broken? Those kinds of things. So
that's incredible. We'll have to find that. We'll have to link that on the website.
Yeah,
that's where you can find this recording. I'm super curious about that. Yeah. I have one last question regarding mail art in general. I was curious what you all think about the future of mail art. What can we expect? I know it's been, developing, and the pandemic has definitely had its impact, but where do you all think that we will go from here?
Well, I think it's introduced a lot of people. I kind of, I think there's in some respects, I could imagine as everyone's kind of getting back to their normal routine, hopefully things would be, maybe tapering off a little bit, but I think it's introduced a lot of people. I think it's going to continue to grow. I think it's going to evolve. And there's a whole new generation of people who've probably been really longing for these types of activities. It's a chance for them to kind of experiment with. And I think it's exciting to see it's evolving in a new way.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement too. I think, when I think about it, I think, we're kind of in the 3rd or 4th wave of the timeline, the trajectory of this. And so now, the message in my mind is more about connecting with people, community building, sharing skills, and that kind of thing, as opposed to, it's not so much like it was in the early days where it was all about like, subverting the gallery system and figuring out unusual ways to do things. And, we're like avoiding traditional systems and things like that. I feel like it's much more connection based now, and that's the primary focus for a lot of people getting involved now.
But I think there's also some overlap with, I know just there's been a lot of political mailing stuff, people really sending postcards, and that has actually activated people there's been some interesting overlap between the mail art world and sending out political postcards, you know, trying to really encourage people to get registered to vote and things. I think that's actually something that I think is going to continue to.
Yeah. And there's a long tradition of that too, like mail art as a political activity. So, yeah.
I think, you know, as we slowly reopen here at Creativity Explored, some of the artists have asked me, are we still going to be doing this? You know, because, and they do want to, and I certainly want to. And I think when the pandemic first started, I remember, you know, different newspaper, the art newspaper had an article on mail art, which was really surprised me because it's a very kind of patrician, stuffy kind of publication. And Hyperallergic had something on mail art. And so, you know, that was in the air. I think it'll continue to be in the air in different ways. We've continued to kind of sort of evolve. One of the fun things that we like to do is not just send back and forth to each other, but send something on to another person with an instruction to add to it and send it on to somebody else in the group. And that's resulted in some really amazing pieces because of the history that accrues, the different styles that show up in it. So I want to keep going, you know, and as evidenced here, we are kind of going out into the larger community. It's not just the Insular Creativity Explored group, which we're very excited about having this connection.
Yeah. We're pretty excited too.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's been
as long as it lasts. So let's keep it going.
We'll keep it going for sure. I'm so excited that we were able to make this connection with you, Jennie and Charles. And I'm so stoked to see what our groups will be sharing amongst each other. And well, thank you all so much again for being here and sharing your experience and talking about mail art. And again, for anyone who hasn't seen the show, it's up until June 11th, but we're also encouraging everyone to send us your mail art. Yeah. So we've already received a ton of mail from the community, which is so fun to see. Something came from Japan, which is so cool. And we're putting everything in our gallery window. So everything that we receive is actually on display together with the rest of the artworks too.
There's some mail art.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. So yeah, thanks again. Sorry, Cheryl?
Put a real stamp on it.
Yeah, that's true. If you want to make sure it gets here. And then whatever you do after that.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you all again so much for being here. We appreciate it so much.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.